Lutembe Bay wetland covers an area of 1,769 hectares and was one of the wetlands in Uganda that was recently gazetted by the Wetland Management Department and NEMA as a Ramsar site. Lutembe Bay is also known as a famous bird haven, and then as such was being classified as an important bird area. Lutembe Bay wetland is an important non-breeding area for greater population of Palearctic migrant bird species. In 2000, it was reported that the wetland hosted about 3.5 million birds. A 2014 bird count by Nature Uganda indicated that the wetland hosted about 300 different bird species. In addition to being an important biodiversity hotspot, the wetland also plays other key roles for local communities. It's a source of raw materials, local crafts, water for domestic use, fish and income, and also provides agriculture and pasture land. Lutembe wetland is currently being threatened with encroachment and pollution mainly from Rosebud Company, which is a flower farm, a horticultural farm, and also Lake Victoria View Serena Hotel. Together, these two private investors have reclaimed about 17% of the wetland, totaling 300 hectares. And this is what local communities have to say about the situation.
The construction of several big hotels, Lake Serena, along the shores of Lake Victoria, it has really done a great percentage towards the destruction of wetland. So my worry goes to the National Environment Management Authority, together with the Ministry of Water and Environment, who are leaving the nation just to be eaten by some of the people who are just looking for their personal interest, but not the interest of the citizen.
The communities protested, and indeed they were tear gassed. They had the government coming in to coerce them to stop the protest. And at that point in time, that is when we came in to come and support the community cause. What so far we have done is to take the flower company plus the National Environment Management Authority of Uganda to court to sue them over the illegal activity that they were carrying out within the Lutembe wetland. The flower farms are like any of the industries that have been ejected from developed countries have come to Uganda, and of course in the country they are seen as a foreign exchange earner, but in terms of the community health and the environment in general, their impacts are significant. And our concern is that flower industries use a lot of chemicals which eventually end up into the lake. And being that they are located at the periphery of Lake Victoria, most of these chemicals end up into Lake Victoria. And to us, that is a very big issue of concern, because Lake Victoria is a source of livelihood for many communities, as you may have seen, and it is also a major source of income for our country in terms of fish exports, but also the major source of water supply is Lake Victoria itself to most parts of this country. So to us, the contamination of Lake Victoria significantly affects our work.
Originally, the wetland was not there, and that Lutembe area did not have water. It is during a Nino where water levels went high, and then more land was submerged. Now, when the land was submerged, even the land which had the title was also submerged. You get the challenge. Now, the person who has a title, for him when he was selling, people who are buying did not go there to see whether it was a wetland or a non-wetland. Now, he sold to one of the richest guys here called Sudir, and he sold him 500 acres of land. And if you go there, most of those acres, some of it even go up to Lake Victoria.
Okay.
And that's why you see a number of flower farms. But what we have done, what we have agreed with him, of course, he had the right on land. Originally, he had agreed with NEMA that out of the 500, he develops 50 acres, and forgoes the 450 acres. But even later we realized
it's now a wetland.
it is a wetland and a lake. That one you should not even bother.
Okay.
But even on the 50 which had been given, we have been having battles with him that still it is a wetland.
Yeah.
And I think so far he has developed only about 40 acres. And where we have reached now, we have said a stop. I think we are not going to have more flower farms in that wetland. We are not going to have more activities in that wetland. With the housing estates, at least those are somehow some meters away from the wetland. But still we are working around, and we have even demarcated the boundaries for that wetland. So before you do an activity there, you have first come and consult us, and we guide you whether what you're going to do is within the regulations or it is destructive to the wetland, and then see what to do with your land. People have misused the issue of the EIA. Actually, EIA is supposed to tell you, to give you alternatives and tell you whether the activity is suitable or not. But here, the moment you tell someone to go for EIA, it is like you have told him go and start work. And even practitioners, because they are paid by those investors, they tend to be more to the investor rather than on the conservation part. But the advantage you have now, as I sit here, you can see I have a cabinet paper which is directing that all landed people who have land titles in wetland should be cancelled. So as I talk now, we are working on the mechanisms on how to implement that directive without causing unnecessary conflict.
So for this particular flower farm, the EIA was conducted?
Yeah, it was conducted, but I told you the conditions are not being followed. Yeah, the EIA is there. It is a document, but what was put in the EIA is not being followed, because you know, the implementing the EIA, sometimes the option they give, the alternatives, the mitigation measures are very, very costly. So most of these investors try to find a way of dodging those measures. Yeah, you know, the main thing in wise use, there are so many things. One, the activity must be economically viable. You have to look at the cost benefit. If leaving the wetland is more beneficial than degrading the wetland, then you better leave the wetland. That is one of the ways this is promoted. Two, it also looks at where is the activity located. Is it located in the right place at the right time? Even if, because fish ponds would be wise use, but depending on where you locate them, they can be unwise. Yeah, because some people have put them in the center of the wetland, and when it rains, everything floods. I don't think that is wise use. Then you also look at social acceptability, communities, the activity which you are doing, if it is acceptable by the community. Like that flower farm you see in Lutembe, communities are in arms. They don't want it at all. So I don't think that one is a wise use activity. Even if it underwent the impact assessment, it is not.
And this is a study that was collaborated between IUCN Netherlands and Wageningen University of the Netherlands. This study used the ecosystem service approach to identify the most relevant ecosystem services provided by the Lutembe wetland, and also to identify the total value of these services provided by the wetland in terms of its ecological value, the socio-cultural value, and then the economic value of the wetland. And lastly, try to identify the implications of land reclamation and pollution in the wetland on the identified wetland values. So, ecosystem services are the benefits that people derive from nature. Services such as fresh water, fish, food, raw materials from ecosystems such as forests, wetlands, peatlands.
The ecosystem services approach is about better understanding of why ecosystems are important for our well-being. Conservation in the past has mainly been based on intrinsic values of ecosystems, which is still a very valid argument, but in addition to nature conservation for the sake of protecting species, it also provides many other benefits, which we now call ecosystem services. The global economy depends on all those ecosystem services for at least somewhere between 3 and 5% of GDP. for all those so-called free services. One reason to do all this quantification and valuation is that we should make better decisions. If we also on a small scale make decisions about maintaining a forest or maintaining a wetland, instead of turning it into a plantation or a shrimp farm, we need to be aware of all those ecosystem services and of all the economic benefits. And now we make those decisions based on very incomplete information. The idea is to do that in a more integrated way, and for that this concept is really useful, both for the analytical part of the problem, to better understand how ecosystems are providing the services, but also for communicating that to local communities, to policymakers and to the business community. Yeah, and an important benefit of this approach is that it shows very clearly how often what I call private benefits or private interests from companies, like in the Lutembe Wetland case, the flower industry, are affecting the livelihood and the benefits of and the benefits that the local community get from the lake. They depend on the lake for fish, for other raw materials, and environmental quality in general.
TEEB stands for the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity. TEEB is basically all about ending the invisibility of nature in decision-making, economic decision-making primarily. So TEEB draws on economics and the theories of economics to look at and evaluate nature and the services that ecosystems provides, and incorporate these values into the way we make decisions around resource allocation. We work to support local civil society on particular ecosystem challenges. And TEEB is very much a new approach for civil society in Latin America, Africa and Southeast Asia. But what we have tried to do is to try and build their understanding of the concept of TEEB. And this particular project in Uganda was built out of the interest that our local partners in Uganda expressed in terms of addressing the challenges that this Lutembe wetland faced, and identified that a use of economic arguments would be important in the way they were able to influence policymakers and other stakeholders.
ICN's role within the project was mainly giving technical support. That's mainly my colleague who's been doing it, but also working with the partners we already have in Uganda and putting them in contact with Kwame and engaging them in the project, but also providing some financial support for the program and for the research.
The main ecosystem services provided by Lutembe tend to be food, water, fish, construction materials, fodder for cattle, etc., which was mainly provisioning services. The other services included regulatory services, cultural services, and habitat services. Regulatory services such as climate regulation, maintenance of hydrological regimes, and pollution control. Other cultural services included spiritual and inspiration, recreation, and aesthetic and educational values. It also provided habitat or supporting services, which was mainly entrenched in the biodiversity and rare species that the Lutembe wetland hosts. Using indicators of rarity, diversity, integrity, and resilience, Lutembe was found to have a high ecological value. This was because of the number of rare species that it hosted. Lutembe also had high biodiversity in its birds and plant species. The health of Lutembe, however, was medium because of the ongoing pollution and land reclamation. and this also affected its resilience because it hosted very fragile plant and animal species, most of which were endangered and biome restricted. Lutembe was also found to have very high socio-cultural value or importance. This was found in its high amenity, heritage, and spiritual values, as well as its existence values. Communities were found to have totems, protect sacred groves, and have traditional knowledge of gods and medicines. They also have ancestral bonds with what they call their jaja, which is their ancestors. The existence value, however, was expressed through how local communities protested against governmental agencies and the flower company, as well as the fight to protect the wetland using lawsuits against governmental agencies by civil society and local communities as well. The total economic value of Lutembe wetland was estimated to be around $31 million. Of this, provisioning services, which was fish, water breaks, food, etc., contributed about $18 million. Other services such as cultural services, regulating services, and habitat services contributed $4 million, $7 million, and $800,000 respectively. The study also found out that of the $31 million, which was the economic value of the wetland, local communities benefited about $14 million, followed by the flower farm, and then the hotel, which benefited around $12 million and $4 million respectively. The study took a step further to assess the ecosystem services which are affected by land reclamation and pollution. It found that all the ecosystem services categories were affected. For provisioning services, access and quality of water were affected. Also fish, food, and medicines. For habitat services, the biodiversity is affected because of land reclaimed. Also, spawning areas are subject to pollution because of its proximity to the flower farm. For regulatory services, this affected, even though to a smaller degree, flood prevention, pollution control, water recharge, and microclimate regulation functions of the wetland. And also, the aesthetics of the wetland was affected because of reclamation, like greenhouses and the hotel. After estimating the cost of the impact of land reclamation and pollution, the study also tried to identify winners and losers of the current situation. Flower Farm, which is Rosebud Company, loses less than $1,000 per year as a result of land reclamation and pollution, which represents 0.2% loss of its benefits. Local communities, however, lose about $4 million of their benefits, which represent about 30% loss.
This is Namulanda, and this is how it looked after. Before the flowers, and this, you can see that here we had a forest, and this is the lake. This is the swamp where we had fishing centers, so fishing landing centers for fishermen. We had also some crops like coffee. All of these were activities that the villages benefited from. And we all know that crops have certain issues with chemicals that are used in the flowers. Because these flowers, they use chemicals to spray within them. And those chemicals come and affect the crops. And besides that, the lake itself was consumed by these flowers because the investor came seeking for waters or where there is a swamp, maybe also land for free, because we don't think he bought it. It might have been land that was given to him. He consumed the biggest part, including feeding sand into the lake to cover the biggest part he could put on his plantation. At this, where you see this is where there was a landing field. With comparison, take a once. Where there is a gate now for Rosebud is where there was fishing, a landing center for fishermen, where they could gather or between Miaro. And around here we had wells we had bricks, where like bricklayers were also around the swamp for access of water. And these swamps also, we had some creatures. We had creatures in these swamps, creatures like snakes, crocodiles, birds, and other animals and creatures also, which are not present now. Because you can see from this that where there was a swamp is now a fence covering the entire village. And most of this part here, this was all water, as you can see up here. This is a map. This was the lake and the swamp. But where there was a lake and a swamp is now, this was all filled up and is now flowers. They covered it with sand and it's now flowers. And those who used to fish from that piece of lake, they can't access that now. All of the bricklayers are now off the brick. So all of the boys and who used to earn a living from that are now jobless. These are formerly brick quarries, but now they are deserted because the water was cut off. They can't access water from it. These people who had crops here now, you can see that it's now empty because the chemicals that are said that they come from the flowers are affecting the crops directly. So those people have also stopped growing anything from it. This was all water, but it's now rosebud. It's full of flowers. And we have no any activity now going down there. There were animals and other creatures that were in this part. So these creatures are now coming back to the neighborhood of the people. They are coming back to the land. So this means that now we have conflict. People are fighting with snakes, with crocodiles, with other animals that were formerly in the lake, and now the lake that is filled, they are looking for space elsewhere, which is in the people. So there are a lot of issues. If you see these three maps, there is a big difference. And this, if you can see from the first map, this shows like that the environment was good. There is no pollution. There is no effect. Everyone is doing their own. Animals are in the lake or in the swamps. People are up and they are doing their normal business. But if you come down here, you can see how environment has been destroyed. Environment has been destroyed. Everywhere is a settlement. And it's because of the rosebud, because of this good investment, but it is in a wrong place. It would have been where there is no people, so that there are no effects. But since it is in the wrong place, it is affecting the entire neighborhood. People are getting sick, animals are dying, birds are fleeing away, crops are not growing, like the normal area is dead. And if you sit down here, all of the resources that were up are nowhere to be seen later, like 10 years after, which everyone thought it was a good investment. It turns out to be a bad investment, which means there is a lot of things to be considered while giving away these investors' land. We should consider people's lives first.
To make sure that the critical ecological systems that surround the lake are conserved. I have already said we have very good laws. I think one of the most critical things is to respect the laws that we put in place. For the first instance, I must say that we put these laws in place well aware that they are very useful in conserving our natural resources. But when we do not utilize them to conserve the resources, then we really defeat the purpose for which these laws were put in place. And then seriously considering the process of the EIA. Let it be done for a meaningful purpose so that we utilize these EIAs to help us in the sustainable management of these resources. And the other thing is that since government holds in trust the wetlands for the people of Uganda, I think it should listen to the people that are directly affected when these wetlands are degraded. They should consult them and let them be part of the process, part and parcel of the process of managing wetlands in the country.
Let these people come down to the community, to the local authorities, local people, because for us, if we may even think that they are doing bad when they are doing well. That means you have to combine, because we need them for taxes, we need them for employment. Let them come down. We sit with them, we see how we can benefit from them. And let them also assure us that there is no damages they are doing with our soils.
The best is to come to a round table and let's discuss and find out the best solution to this, because going round and round and round it won't help, because all our interest is to save the resource, and if the resource goes, the person who will be losing most will be the government, because it will have to go through probably even spending lots of money to provide for something that should have been provided free.
Now that everything is wasted, it is going to be done elsewhere. Let them first think about the effects of the people before the investments are done. That will give us the clear know-how to do things and what to do and what not to do. Otherwise, we are taking our lives, we are killing our environment, we are welcoming what is worse for us. We think, yes, employment is good, but it is better to do it where it is right, other than doing it where it is wrong. There is a lot of space that this investment would have been taken, but simply because our leaders are negligent, they think so brief, they don't take it to the next level or think the future of it. That is why we are being affected by such things. So the issue is, let us know where we put what and when. Otherwise, we are going to destroy the rest of our environment, which is going to put us in jeopardy in the future.
We have now Lutembe Community Wetland Users Association. That is what I wanted to happen. We have now formed Lutembe Ramsar Site Committee. That's what we wanted to happen. What we want now, we are going to form Lutembe Ramsar Site Forum, where every year we come together, all stakeholders, and share about Lutembe. Two, I would like us maybe to partner with private people instead of going there to degrade, to promote ecotourism. Find a way, how do we add more value to that Ramsar site other than degrading it? And the area of, we have a high potential for ecotourism in that area. And we have been selling this to Uganda Tourism Board. Why don't you consider looking at wetlands as also ecotourism sites? Because they have a lot of biodiversity, there are different types of fish. Then another area where we need to move very fast is research. We need to get more information about this site so that we can disseminate this information, and then people get more interested in the site.